Okay. Thank you. Okay. רוצה... רגע, אבל חבל לך. רגע, עופר, תפס לי את המקום שלי. לא, הניירות שלי שם. Okay. Oli, we can start. Oli, can we start? You are the Chief Executive Officer here. Okay. Okay, dear guests, good afternoon and thank you for joining us for the official side event of Israeli local government in the Israeli pavilion. My name is Eitan Atiyah and I am the director of Forum 15, the Forum of Self-Government Cities within the Federation of Local Authorities in Israel. The event was organized by Climate Initiative in Tel Aviv University in conjunction with Forum 15 and the Federation of Local Authorities in Israel. In this event, we will address and discuss the leading role of cities and local governments in dealing with climate change in Israel and worldwide. The event will be divided into 3 parts and will include experts and professionals dealing with the challenges of local authorities in leveraging climate action on 3 levels, also 3, global, national, and local. I would like to begin by setting the stage for our discussion today. Municipalities in Israel share challenges with other cities around the world. However, local authorities in Israel face a unique combination of challenges. On one end, Israeli population is growing in an extremely high rate, one of the fastest in the world. According to the current estimation, by the middle of the century, our population will have doubled, and before the end of the century, even tripled. On the other hand, the remaining land reserves available for further urban expansion in Israel are very limited. This means that within the coming decades, Israeli cities will have to literally find room for twice or thrice the amount of people, more or less, within their current municipal boundaries. This main challenge is joined by the existing and increasing environmental, economic, and social challenges that all cities around the world face: climate change, inequality, a constant increase in the standard of living, and so on. These trends will stretch the limits of our urban systems and may significantly undermine the ability of local authorities to sustain a reasonable quality of life. This situation creates major challenges for cities dealing with climate change. In terms of mitigation, the constant growth in population and the rising standard of living mean that GHG emissions will increase almost inherently. In terms of adaptation, Israeli cities are already feeling the effects of climate change. Extreme rainfall events increase the frequency and magnitude of urban floodings. Cities are also becoming much hotter and suffer from longer and more severe heat waves. These pressures and their already significant impacts on our cities have reinforced our understanding that we cannot continue waiting for the national government to act. We must take action. We must prepare our cities. We must lead. The extensive urban development is an opportunity to rethink how we plan and build our cities. The shortage of public spaces obliges us to be creative about how to use and share the existing spaces and buildings more efficiently. The increased threat of floods leads us to return to nature-based solutions while rehabilitating urban nature and biodiversity. Increasing waste production leads cities to initiate local solutions, recycling facilities, schemes for repair and reuse, etc. This is why the major cities of Israel are working to promote joint initiatives on climate change, enhancing cities' capabilities to deal with the challenge. In 2008, we launched our mitigation policy, Forum 15's Climate Convention. In 2013, we decided to adopt green building as a mandatory planning requirement. In 2018, we launched the Cities Alliance for Quality of Life and Environment, which is a blueprint for comprehensive local action for urban sustainability. Further initiatives are being adopted in many local authorities in Israel, and today we will meet some of the leaders and professionals who promote them. But first, we are honored to host in our event today some of the world's leading experts in the field of local climate action. Our first keynote speaker will be Professor William Selecki, co-founder of the UCCRN, Urban Climate Change Research Network, who will discuss the challenges that cities face at the forefront of climate change. He will be followed on the same theme by Professor Rubin Leitchenko, co-founder of Rutgers Climate Institute and co-chair of NPCC, New York City Panel of Climate Change. Professor Selecki, please.
Great, thank you. Okay, it's a privilege to be here and to say a few things regarding cities and climate change, something I've been studying for 20 years. So it's sort of, I was thinking about the comments just made, it's sort of that we have to act. My colleague Cynthia Rosenzweig and I have been looking at that question for a long time, and the idea, really in the last 20 years, it's illustrated time and time again that cities take the lead in this context. And one of the things that we recognized in that leadership is that it's not only at the government level, but also at the academic level. So what I'm going to talk a little bit today about, just as a little bit of an intro, I will say, as per the introduction to myself, I could say a lot of things about cities and climate change. You probably know a lot of these things that I would say. But I want to speak about more specifically is about the research network that we've created that enables us to sort of galvanize and sort of bring together some of those pieces, some of those interests among academics, but also among local government. And so the essence of what we've been talking about is the Urban Climate Change Research Network. We have, I'll describe it a little bit, talk a little bit about its approach, some of the products, and then in that context, you'll get a sense of some of the issues that we're looking at and some of the overarching questions that sort of guide our work. So as you see, it's an extended network, and what we sort of saw in 2007, already 15 years ago, is that there was a lot of interest, a lot of emerging interest among scholars, many oftentimes young scholars, in the question of climate change and how it's going to be affecting the places around them, the cities around them, as well as interest within cities, city governments, NGOs, asking that fundamental question, how is climate change going to affect what we do? And so what we saw in 2007 was that these sort of constellations, these linkages were already starting to appear But what we really needed to do is to figure out a mechanism to sort of bring these interests together. So myself, Cynthia Rosenzweig, and many others sort of created this, what we describe as a horizontal network, in order to create this sort of confederation of these clusters of researchers with practitioners. And so through that, we have the Urban Climate Change Research Network. So if we go to the next slide, that's me, isn't it? Yes, there we go. Okay, so the approach. So how do we go about doing this? One more. Does it work? Here we go. Okay, so one of the things that we've, and I'll kind of touch on this a little bit, we've created these sort of large-scale assessments of the literature. But one of the fundamental questions that we asked ourselves, what is it about cities that allow them to be transformative, or what are the conditions that would sort of emphasize transformative action? And this was something that we prepared in preparation for a cities-focused COP discussion at the 2015 COP meeting, which was a very extravagant event in Paris City Hall. And what coming out of the literature was the sort of recognition that we need to do certain things to sort of accelerate the process of transformative action in cities. So for example, linking mitigation and adaptation, focusing on equity, recognizing the impacts of extreme events, and also establishing these sort of knowledge networks that sort of link together these different sort of connective tissues. And it's within this practice that the idea of accelerating meaningful transformative adaptation can take place. We also sort of recognize that there are these sort of multiple pathways that would take place with respect to adaptation, and that and of course we recognize in a country like Israel, a country like the United States, no cities are similar, although there are some similarities across all of them in terms of how they would approach the question of climate change. And also the broader issue of risk management and mitigation. So the idea of these different pathways became a really critical part of the approach embedded within the UCCRN, and to sort of look at these sort of connections between a resilience-focused effort or a transformative action as opposed to more of a resistance or sort of stay the course sort of approach to climate response, or in a case of inaction, potentially collapse. Oops. So these are, and I apologize, it may be a little small to read, but the essence of the conversation here is like, what are the things that we also saw was really appropriate for creating this sort of response capacity and linking together, most importantly, linking together academic and practitioners. This has been one of the overarching ambitions of our work, to try to sort of figure out what is the secret sauce, so to speak, of sort of making these connections, these partnerships work. And you can see, some of the recognition, building bridges from the different communities within the city, providing mechanisms for self-determination of knowledge. So creating systems where individuals or organizations within the city government or within the NGO community can identify their needs and sort of connect it to this sort of larger set of questions. Facilitating case studies. So one of the things that we found, not only within individual cities, but across multiple sets of cities, is that there were these really interesting case studies were emerging, and the question is, how do we link those together? Strengthening, and also a lot of focus on the universities themselves, enhancing the capacity for professors, in some cases young professors, to develop new courses that will focus on climate change, and also to create courses and opportunities for students to do outreach into the community, into governments, through a range of sort of learning opportunities, extension service models, so to speak, which is that sort of the notion of a civic university. The other thing, of course, is the idea of evaluation mechanisms as well. Okay, so just with that in mind, I'm just going to review a couple of the products. So one of our key things have been these assessments. We have hundreds of researchers throughout the world have compiled these assessment documents that are supposed to bring forward sort of an IPCC for cities. So specifically on, published through Cambridge University Press, they're all downloadable and available. We're now in the process of creating a third assessment report, which is a linkage across multiple elements, which I'll talk about in a moment. We've created regional hubs globally, which connect, which have two purposes. One, they become vehicles to sort of bring forward some of those issues that are relevant to particular regions, to a central community, and then sort of distributing that out, but also a distribution mechanism. As these assessment reports, we translate them back out to local communities. There's also a recognition of the case studies, so we've developed a case study docking station so people can sort of put in their work, and then it could be kind of cataloged and organized so others could retrieve it. We have hundreds of case studies now of urban adaptation action in different cities. And the searchable database, I'll have information, a QR code, et cetera, where you can go to the website, you can see more about what is available. We also have these urban design workshops that have been designed specifically to link together practitioners and policymakers in a sort of a designated space over a period of days to address central questions. These become really very important mechanisms to advance the sort of collaboration and solution space development. And this is sort of where we are now, the current edge. We're developing this sort of compendium of elements, which are sort of somewhat similar to chapters, published by Cambridge University Press. We'll be publishing them in sequence over the next couple of years. These are some of the topic areas that are being developed. And again, these reflect both the interests from the hub, but also other issues identified in the literature. So with that, I just want to, again, recognize this work of literally hundreds of people who have been involved in this confederation. We've come out with this sort of, some key findings, even in these early days of this current assessment in terms of compounding and cascading risks. The issue of equity is certainly coming up in this recent assessment process. Many other sort of things to report as time goes on. And the shadow is a little bit tough over there for me to see, but I think it's basically saying we're in full swing, and we look forward to partnering with others and even the potential of creating greater connections with the Israeli research community as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor.
All right, well, thank you. I'm really happy to be here, and thank you, Tel Aviv University, for the invitation to speak today. So my comments are, in a way, like almost zeroing in on what one city is doing in terms of making these linkages between science and policy for climate preparedness. So I will talk a little bit about the work that I've been doing with the New York City panel on climate change. And so the New York City panel it's a 20-member panel of experts. We were appointed by the mayor of the city of New York to basically advise the city on the latest science, the latest kind of scientific findings on climate change, and then how to use those, potentially using those findings in sort of city decision making. So we don't advise what the decision making should be, but it's the idea of providing really kind of state-of-the-art scientific knowledge that's then useful to city policymakers. It's been around since 2008, so about 15 years now. We're actually in our fourth panel. So I've been participating on the panel since the beginning, but in this fourth phase, I'm one of the co-chairs of the panel. One of the important things, and I noted that how it became established in local law in 2012, because for the first 5 years or so, it was sort of something that the city, kind of served at the pleasure of the mayor, but it could easily not, a new mayor comes in and the panel doesn't exist anymore. And so it was actually established in local law that the panel needs to be sort of, meet yearly, but then sort of reassembled every few years to having a report out, and especially within a year after the IPCC scientific projections come out. So this would be like the working group 1 scientific projections around things like sea level rise, changes in temperatures, and so forth. We produce scenarios for the city that then the city needs to use to take into account in terms of doing, especially infrastructure planning new, any kind of new roads, new bridges, all of those sort of big decisions that really need to take climate change into account. It's sort of baked into the city law that the panel has to be sort of assembled, and it has to be at least, whether the city listens to us or not is sort of another story, but at least that there's sort of a public record established that these of the projections for what climate change will mean for New York. So we've produced several over the course of the life of the MPCC. We've produced 3 reports. We're working now on our 4th report, and if I had to trace like an evolution of these reports, I would say that they've become more and more gone from very maybe physical science orientation to more of a kind of blended physical and social science. So really recognizing that just knowing what's going to happen with sea level rise or what's going to happen with precipitation, just having that knowledge out there, that knowledge needs to be translated so that it's usable for policymakers, so that it's meaningful for urban communities. And so really bringing in the social science and the social science sort of piece of the work has become more and more, I think, significant. This is another one of the kind of, I think, achievements of the panel. This is sort of an earlier achievement that we've been really relying on this whole framework of thinking about adaptation. And it definitely fits in with what Bill was talking about with thinking about flexible transition pathways. This was sort of thinking really initially about, as cities are trying to adapt to climate change, making sure that the adaptations that are made have that capacity to themselves be flexible for future climate change. So we don't know with precision, we know with precision maybe what's happening over the next several years, but we think many urban decisions are 10-year, there's a 10-year time horizon, a 20-year time horizon. Urban infrastructure can be even a 100-year time horizon. So making sure that as we're moving along and taking adaptation actions, that those actions we can adjust and we can sort of have this capacity to, in other words, not to make major hard infrastructure adaptations that will then maybe put us just in as vulnerable a position if the climate changes more than we might think. So sort of having that flexibility baked in has been part of the process. Just another sort of example is sort of using, again, like the thinking kind of evolving over time and using, so again, kind of spanning this from, in this case, from 2008 through 2019, using as updates are made on sea level rise, as updates are made on flood projections, redoing the mapping for the city so that the city it always has up-to-date maps, and especially, in New York, because it's so vulnerable, sea level rise, we had Hurricane Sandy, we've really, had very significant extreme events that we've had to deal with, which is actually my next slide. Another, I think, benefit of having the panel in place, and another real benefit for the city has been, we've been hit with unexpected extreme events. So when the panel was first assembled in 2008, we had just been hit by a financial crisis, which was a major hit to the city. But we hadn't, at that point in recent years, really been hit by a huge climate impact or huge climate event. But then in 2012, we were hit by Hurricane Sandy, which cost something like $40 billion worth of damage in New York, where I live in New Jersey, another 30+ billion. It was an extremely significant event that because the reports were in place, the panel was in place, the city was hearing and being advised, and so that sort of in responding to Sandy, was sort of maybe more prepared for Sandy because the panel existed and had already made projections about the need to, for example, stop the subways. If there's a hurricane or there's some kind of storm surge happening, the subway tunnels are likely to be flooded, and so the city made a decision, halt the subways with the projections that Sandy was coming. So those kinds of those kinds of decisions have been, having the panel in place has been, I think, really meaningful in that way. And then certainly with responding, most recently we've had, COVID has been, I know it was a terrible hit on Israel, it was really a terrible hit in New York and New Jersey as well. And even subsequently we've had, some extreme rainfall events where having that sort of, kind of almost established sort of group in place when an extreme event happens, to be able to rely on that group for advice and for guidance. So just in terms of what we're doing now, where we are, we're in the middle of the NPCC 4. We should be producing a special report, which is, in theory, a year after the 2021 Working Group 1 report came out with climate risk projections. We'll be producing our projections. Fingers crossed we'll get them out by the end of the year. And then we're in the midst of a bigger report with a number of different working groups. You can see the topics: climate science, flooding, health, equity, et cetera. These topics themselves, I would say, just to interject, were decided through co-production, meeting with people from the mayor's office, identifying what were the critical things that they're really worried about right now. And so that's how we came up with what the working groups should be. It wasn't like we decided, oh, we think these are the good things to study. We really, we really work very collaboratively, ongoing collaboration with the mayor's office. One thing else also just to mention, this much greater interest in equity. So it's really been equity in thinking about, what are the vulnerable populations, which populations are vulnerable, how can we reduce vulnerabilities, but we've also been thinking about equity in terms of our practices as scientists, so making sure that our scientific meetings are inclusive, making sure that we're meeting with communities and sort of hearing the voices of communities, so really thinking a much more kind of, and maybe a more sophisticated understanding of equity, so it isn't just distributive equity, but it's really thinking about procedural equity, thinking about contextual equity, and bringing those into the work. And I think that's my last slide. There's a link for the latest on the panel. So, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Lechenko. To complete the first part of our session, I invite Mr. Stuart Sarkozy-Bonassi from the Resilient Cities Network to talk to us about catalyzing adaptation locally.
Good afternoon, everyone. As soon as we get the slides up, I'll dive in. But one of the things that, first of all, I want to thank Orly for bringing us all together and for hosting us here with the rest of the panelists and speakers. And it was very nice to go after the first two because there's a kind of personal history that ties to the work in New York and to Hurricane Sandy and how I ended up in resilience. I served on the task force, the federal task force, President Obama's task force for Hurricane Sandy. And just as a personal note, that moment sort of forced me to say, am I going to stay in sort of the disaster response area and disaster risk reduction, or do I go towards resilience building and go towards the sort of recovery rather than the constant recovery treadmill? And so in some ways, the work that we're doing at Resilient Cities Network parallels that and comes out of this work globally. So again, my name is Stuart Sarkozy-Bonassi. I'm the Global Director for Policy and Investments for Resilient Cities Network. I've held a few other roles and have been around since the very beginning in 2013 when the organization started through the selection of the cities that are part of the membership. So our cities, just to give you background, are all over the globe, 5 different regions. We have offices in 4 of those regions, and each of those places has a chief resilience officer. And that chief resilience officer worked with us to create a resilience strategy. Tel Aviv-Yafo is one of our cities, and so is Ramallah. So we have spent a great deal of time in each city working with the chief resilience officers and doing the resilience strategies. What's different now, and this kind of leads me to where we're headed, is this is what we're encountering in terms of the way that we work instead of the kind of strategy building and placement and conversations, because the choice to fund and put chief resilience officers into cities was a very specific one and not a very easy one, because the systemic change that was necessary was disruptive. But it's been an amazing process, and it's been an amazing success to see. We work with other cities now that have chief resilience officers, but frankly, I can't even keep up with the new chief resilience officers that are being created in cities, counties, states, and in governments all over the world that are not directly part of the network or the work that we're doing now. So because we have strategies, and I should have said, should mayors rule the world? Sort of. Because that's where the work gets done. And you'll hear that to some extent in these conversations at COP, even though the negotiations are at the national level, right, at the global level. Frankly, you don't call the president or the prime minister for a pothole, right? This gets done at the local level. And especially with the growing shocks and stresses, we're now doing the kind of three-step work with the cities because we have to implement. And by implementation, I mean putting resilient projects in the ground and the right policies that follow them and the right funding and financing. So this is sort of our model now in terms of how we work with cities, because we're adding cities and we are doing some strategies, but what we're trying to do is actually change the algorithm that we're in of that recovery treadmill. And to be clear, our definition of resilience is not just about surviving. This is outdated and it's too often used still. It's not even just about adapting, because we do that and we do want that to be part of the conversation, even here at COP, where it's generally more focused on mitigation. We want to make sure that what we're doing is the adaptation and full mitigation pieces of the projects that we're doing. It also means that it's not just going to be enough if we don't get to the thriving part. So for us, it's surviving, adapting, and more importantly, thriving in all shocks and stresses in combination. So you heard some of the statistics, you heard some of the kind of work that's been done, especially on the academic side and what's needed in the cities. We're at the practitioner side of it, and we're with the governments and we're with the partners of the governments. How do we get the projects done in the ground? And so this is the sort of the way that we do it. And there's a much longer background to that. But in one slide, this is, in a sense, what we're doing. We're constantly hitting by shocks and stresses, and therefore cascading effects from those shocks and stresses. Our seesaw, teeter-totter, is out of balance, and we're in this recovery treadmill. So at the local level, as cities work and improve their projects and add resilience, what we're trying to do is get the return on resilience value, not just a return on interest or a return on whatever it might be that brings this forward, but a return on the resilience value that puts the co-benefits and these resilience dividends together to create what I like to call cascading proper effects instead of the cascading benefits. And we base that on the fulcrum at the bottom, which is this resilience value, the R value, with those characteristics. And the idea being that if we're using that fulcrum and those characteristics, and we're pushing down on the other side, that the cities, the mayors, who may rule the world, are able to push back and design things, even if they're getting federal money. And of course, that's the difference that's happening in a lot of the cities around the world that we're working with. So for us, which is also unusual from where we started, we actually have some thematic resonance that we use. 2 pillars with sub-themes and cross-cutting. You can imagine why the recovery pieces in health is in there, because we are not even done yet, and we knew that that was something that could come. And some of the strategies had pandemics in their sort of shocks and stresses that they listed as potentially coming, not that they were on hand. And so climate resilience with the subcategories and circularity are where we're pushing down. And so programmatically, we're into these themes as we push on with the broader resilience, holistic resilience lens. And I should say, equitable holistic resilience for us, as I noted, and the definition, has led to us creating a racial equity through resilience community of practice, triggered in part by the murder in Minneapolis of Mr. Floyd, and yet that was always part of the equation that we needed to be working on. So just a couple more slides to say the way that we're trying to mobilize and implement now means we're starting to create our own fund. We're starting to create tools that measure projects' resilience so that we can get the value in and then assess it as time goes on, which is really important because, of course, humans don't like to pay for things not to happen. But that's actually what we're asking you to do, and that's what we need to start accounting for, is having things not happen. And we've got a funding and financing assessment that we're using for our grants, but we've also been working and testing for the last 2.5 years on lending organizations. And those lending organizations then have followed these 3 principles with a whole dashboard that analyzes project by project. That means in that city, for that mayor, for those lending institutions, we're baking that resilience in ahead of time. One of the latest things that we've done, we've been talking about it here, and I'll talk about it more in a panel that Orly's been organizing for Thursday evening. But with our partners, we've launched this investment protocol for coastal cities that really starts to look at the big funders, the small funders, our funds. We released this blue paper, you can find that online, to really organize ourselves around that thematic because there's so much threat and there's so much urgency. That's how you can find me. And thanks for the time, and look forward to the rest of the discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Sarkozy. Before we end the first part of our session, 1 or 2 questions only. Because of the time, 1 or 2 questions for our experts, our 3 experts, wonderful 3 experts. If someone has a question. Okay, we're moving on. We would like to move on to the second part of our event, from the global perspective to the Israeli context. I would like to invite 3 leading Israeli climate professionals for a short discussion on barriers and opportunities for leveraging local climate action. In the government corner, I invite Senior Deputy Director for Nature and Climate in the Israeli Ministry of Environmental Protection, Dr. Netta Lipman. Netta, please. In the NGO corner, Advocate Tami Ganot, Deputy Director of IUED Association, which is known in Israel as Adam Teva V'Din. Last but not least, in the academic corner, and leading this discussion, we have Dr. Orly Onen, Head of the Climate Innovation Lab in Porter School for Environment in Tel Aviv University.
Okay, thanks. So thank you very much, everybody. And we have about 12 minutes to sort of solve all the problems and address all the challenges. And we're a gender-balanced panel, and we thought we'd just conduct this on 2 cycles of questions. And are you ready? Okay. So we'll begin with barriers. We've talked a lot about the fact that cities definitely need to address climate change, that adaptation is right here at our doorstep.
Mayors will rule the world, right?
And mayors should rule the world, question mark. But the question is, first of all, we keep talking about local authorities, local government. What's unique about the local government, and what are the specific barriers that local governments are facing? Netta, as government, will give you the lead.
Well, firstly, talking about the climate change, especially in Israel, but most cities, I just came from a year in New York, flooding, for an example, is a major thing. We used to have floods in the desert, and nowadays the floods are going upwards north in the country, which most of the population is. All gathered in big cities. We are lacking of open fields, so the water are going on the ground and cannot, there's a nice word for it, asphaltization. You taught me that, right? So the water have nowhere to go but flooding, and this is a major thing that cities should and have to deal with. First thing, most cities are, but also in Israel and as a Mediterranean area, we're facing it. And the second thing is the heat waves. The hotspots, and how can we deal with that? We need to have a lot of information that cities or municipalities have, and we as a government need to help them get the decision making, as you guys have said, and maybe later on we'll talk about the offers that we are having in the government.
Tami, and before you begin, let's just note that today the 8 billion baby was born, and we've surpassed the 8 billion mark of people, not in Israel, in the world. we're aiming for that, but we're not there yet. And another thing to note is that most of these 8 billion people are living in cities. So obviously, cities need to supply solutions, but there are barriers to that.
I think that it's not just the barriers, I'd say the challenges, and I'll go, I think, more to the way things are operated. I think one of the biggest challenges in cities is understanding that in a limited space, there's a very diverse community. It's really a microcosmos of those 8 billion people you've talked about. So there are some people that are more vulnerable than others. And I think the issue, you have to zoom in and to see the issue of climate justice, of equity, as crucial to creating sustainable policy. There is no municipal resilience without climate justice. It's not just the issue of climate justice, is not just the gap between, that we hear a lot about here in the COP, between the global north and the global south. It's actually between communities very close to each other. Neighborhoods differ greatly, and I think it's a very big challenge for municipalities to address that in their policy making and the implementation of policy. And then zooming out, I think the issue is that many of the challenges some of which Netta described and were described before cannot be addressed solely on a local level. They have to have the necessary frameworks on a national level, on a regional level to support them. So just to touch an example, and I'll elaborate on that later, in a joint project we have with Ramat Gan municipality, the idea is to create water resilient using natural-based solutions, but in order for that project not to be an anecdote, in order for that to be a pilot, an enticing pilot, to have other municipalities follow suit, you have to have an enabling national framework, both regulatory, fiscal, economic, and policy means.
And as we said, the key question for this event is not maybe should mayors rule the world, but how can mayors lead the change? And you're both, obviously, and also the speakers before, you're not from local government, but you're partners with the local government. And how do you see that those partnerships come into motion and succeed? Can you give us good examples, good practices of how to instigate this change on the local level?
Well, I'll start with a known secret. We have established a new team in the government called Adaptation, like 5-6 months ago. And the first thing we've done is working with municipals. And we said, okay, let's start doing programs. We've done it like 2 years ago with the energy and the municipality, but now we said, okay, how can us as the environmental office work with local cities and help them to build a program of adaptation? What do you need? We'll support you. We'll bring you the expert. We'll build this framework. We'll help with models. But we have to start somewhere, and this is where we're starting. And the second thing we've done, also this year, like two months ago, is putting up an open program, open calls for cities to plant trees in order to fight against the heat waves in the cities. And planting tree, I saw your T-shirt before, not only to eat the fruits, but also to use it as mitigation inside the cities. And the third thing we've done, and we're starting doing it now, is working with all kinds of offices in the government, saying you all have to write specific programs by the end of the year, not in 5 years, not in 3 years, by the end of next year, of how are you going to deal with climate change, and especially how are you going to help municipals doing it. But most the tool we're giving cities is something Professor Noga Kornfeld-Shore, our chief scientist, is working on for the last couple of months, is working on maps, hazard maps, that are kind of like you've shown with layers of different geography, places, different hazards, different vulnerability of population, and how we as a government can help with this tool to get a wise and database decision making. And these all are on the pipe, on the work, and gonna be ready by the next couple of, I don't know, months, a year? Yeah, hopefully.
So these are really, I think, very important steps forward. So I'm going to address two examples that I think are inspiring. I've had inspiring ones that I know personally and am involved in. I'm totally not objective, so but I still think it's interesting. But I'll also address two elephants in the room at the end of my little talk. One example, and I mentioned it before, it's the joint project we have with Ramat Gan municipality, partly funded by the EU, where the idea is to build water resilient, municipal water resilience, and it's in collaboration not only with us at Adam Teva V'Din, but also with academia, with Bar Ilan University and Shankar Academy, and with local communities as an idea of a collaborative effort. But here too, what we're hoping for and what we're trying to aim for is to push for the change of models, existing economic models, for instance, by the Water Authority, that will create an incentive, not just be an enabler, but create an incentive for cities to understand that there is actually, it makes sense economically. It's not just something that you want to do because it's the right thing to do, because it's important, but it's actually worthwhile for you to do. And then cities don't have to have an inspirational mayor that sees the issue of climate change as important, but it will actually be the sound decision to make, the sound move to make. So that's on the one hand. And then another example is the very inspirational collaboration between coastal municipalities in Israel, partly under, again, a joint project of the Integrated Coastal Zone Management in Israel, and the forum, the Coastal Municipalities Forum, and this platform allows cities that face similar challenges to learn from each other's experience, to face them together, and to pool necessary resources in order to be better prepared and to work together. Now the two elephants in the room. One, and I think that's very, very important, with the lack of legislation that actually gets us all together on track towards a very ambitious cause, it's going to be very hard to get everyone on board. Such legislation has to be prepared while having mayors being part of the discussion, part of the framing the way a law should look, the way it addresses the problems they know best, and they are best equipped to know how to deal with, to know the solutions needed. So a law, an advanced climate law to Israel, I think, is crucial for all aspects, including those in the pipeline that Neta addressed, the very important ones. And then the other, I think, huge elephant, and I think there are very inspirational things about that, is funding, is finding the way to create funding to budget. And again, it's nationally, it's private sector, it's from all over, but to create funding that actually incentivizes creating a climate resilient future, urban future.
Thank you very much. I think we've created a toolbox. We've noted funding, we've noted policy, we've noted law, we've noted know-how and information, and also, and here I beg to differ, definitely inspirational mayors. And this is also a very good opening for the next part. So thank you, both of you, and for giving us the opportunity.
Thank you, Neta, Tami, and Orly, for expressing the importance of working with all sectors for dealing with local challenges. Moving on to the third and final part of our event, we would like to hear from local leaders and professionals. To lead this discussion, I am honored to invite Mr. Ofir Pinnas-Paz, former member of the Knesset and former Minister of the Interior, now head of the Institute for Local Government in Tel Aviv University. Joining him on the panel, I invite Mr. Eli Lankry, Mayor of Eilat. Mr. Ofer Ben Eliezer, Mayor of Ramat Yishai, Ms. Maya Crabtree, Director of Climate and Planning Forum 15, and Ms. Chagit Naali Yosef, Director of Strategy, City of Tel Aviv-Yafo.
Thank you. Thank you, Eitan. If you can move forward towards me, Eli, towards me, because I want Chagit, that everyone will see Chagit. Hello, everyone. My name is Ophir Pinas-Paz. I'm the head of the Local Governments Institute at Tel Aviv University. I am the director of the city municipalities, coastal municipalities forum, and I want to welcome our guests, and I will represent them shortly. But I want first of all to say to the Israeli delegation that this is an historical moment, that we have an Israeli pavilion here for the first time in COP27. We had 26 COPs without, but this is a very good move, and I think it's very successful. And the lesson for next time, a bigger room. Anyway, here with, yeah, and a little bit better acoustics, yes. Anyways, I want to introduce my friends, Eli Lankry, the mayor of Eilat, Maya Carpentry from Forum 15. Eli, sorry. Ofer Ben Eliezer, the mayor of Ramat Yishai. Eli Lankry, the mayor of Eilat. And Chagit Naali Yosef, she is the director of strategy department at Tel Aviv municipality. Yeah. I said I represent Maya. You didn't hear? I will do it again. Maya. He didn't hear. He didn't hear. Anyways, I'll start with Eli. Eli, you are the first. I want to ask you. I know that Eilat is for the non-Israelis guests here. Eilat is a very special city in Israel, at the southern of Israel. Very exotic tourist city. Lots of tourists from Israel and from abroad, and very sensitive for environment. So tell us a little bit about Eilat. What are you doing in the last years? And I'm sure that everyone wants to hear you. Please.
Well, first of all, good afternoon. I would say that Eilat and the Lot region, and Dr. Hanan Ginat is the head of the Eilat region is here with us.
Eilat municipality.
Eilat municipality, yes. Are leading in the fields of sustainability, climate change, and clear energy. I believe that we have a clear relative advantage, and together I can say that we are leading a lot of projects. And one of the most significant projects that we are leading together is moving Eilat towards a total independence, energy independence.
Yeah, that's a real challenge.
Yes, and I'm very proud to say that we already today, let's say that 100% of Eilat's needs, electricity needs during the day is from the sun, is solar energy, and I believe that in 3 years from now, let's say by 2025, we can be totally independent. It means that all our needs, all the city needs during the day and the night will be from one clear energy, one renewable energy, from solar energy, from the sun.
Wow, great. Okay.
I can say that we have made it easy for all the residents of Eilat, to install solar power, on the roofs, and most of the residents of Eilat can do it now. And as I said, we produced most of our energy from the solar energy.
Wonderful. Thank you, Eli. Now we move to Ofer. What's going on in Ramat Ishai? You know, Eilat is in the southern, Ramat Ishai is in the north. Very exotic place as well. So tell us a little bit what you are doing in terms of environment and climate change.
So, again, good afternoon to everyone. It's not forced because, you know, he is the sun city. So he have a lot of sun.
Advantage, you're right.
We are in the north, have less...
You see mayors all the time competing.
Yeah.
Okay, he has an advantage, so what?
We do not.
It's good. I think that my mission as a mayor is in two directions. One is the education, and one is the mission of better climate in Israel, in the world, in Ramat Ishai. So by the education, we work all the time, and I think that, for example, we make hike walk, running walk, which going on a river, which called Bethlehem River. It's a river in the north in Ramat Ishai. It's not the Hudson. It's a small one. And we decided not to put a light on there because we don't want to make light pollution, and to make the people to understand that you can live with the nature and with the agriculture and with the human as well. And it's make a lot of question why you don't make lights, and you have to explain it and to the people to understand that it's good for the climate. Or I'm mayor for around 14 years, so in 210, it's been 10 years ago, maybe more. We made the first BOT solar panels, and we made we make roof of all the court in Ramat Ishai with a company. We didn't have money, so we have done it BOT. But I want to say something more. I think that the government doesn't understand what's going on the field, and we have a lot of conflict with the government when we want to advance and do a project, because that maybe we are not synchronized between the local government and the central government. We have seen it in the last epidemic COVID that were, and you know that the local government deal it better than the central government, at least in Israel. We have done it. And I think that if the central government will give us more tools and more free, we can do much more activity to make better environment and better climate.
Thank you, Ofer. Now we'll give the mic to Maya. And Maya, as you are a representative of Forum 15, which is a network of municipalities, strong municipalities, I would say. What do you say about the connections between, so first of all, tell us a little bit about what you're doing as a network and your relationship with the government connected to what Ofer said now.
Well, thank you everyone for coming to this event, and thank you, Ofer, for really beginning on this topic. We actually represent the major cities of Israel. It's easier to explain. The cities dealing with joint challenges of diversity and transportation and providing services to a large geographical area in combination with significant density, the more urbanized cities. And our challenges in terms of adaptation, is there some problem? Yeah. Are shared between cities all around Israel, from Eilat and in the south and to other cities in the north. So Forum 15 brings together these cities to deal with these challenges together. And we see the advantages of networks of cities by helping cities get to solutions together and actually save resources on on the separate thinking and working out of issues and problems. There is no point that every city will invest in resources in working things out by themselves, in determining climate risks, in research. We can work together, we can save time, and we can provide solutions. It's not one size fits all, but in some cases we can share our solutions, working together and also implementing separately. Also, the advantage of a network of cities is that we can work with the government together. We can represent the interests of cities in front of the government, and we have really improved our working relationships with many of the people sitting here and many of the government ministries. Some of our partners are sitting here, the Ministry of Environmental Protection, and I'm glad that our communication has improved. The Ministry of Energy, I see, is sitting here with us, and many other ministries, understanding a little bit more every day the need of cities to receive support and to work on our strong points, as Ofer mentioned, to really empower cities more than they have been done, more than has been done today, and to allow us to lead, to allow us to take things, because the leadership is there. We lack the means. So please, what we do in Forum 15 is to tell the government and tell ourselves, let us lead and let us implement.
Okay, Hagit, tell us a little bit more about what's going on in Tel Aviv. Strong municipality, advanced municipality, and you are, I remind everyone, the director of the strategic department at Tel Aviv municipality. Please.
Yes, thank you. I want to emphasize that in Tel Aviv, Yafo used to promote a planning routine. So it starts with the strategic routine, and afterward the master plan and the resilience plan, a strategic plan, and the adaptation, and now we are working at the mitigation planning. And we need to keep always the vector of the strategic plan and the implementation filed with the municipality units and also at the local level, because Tel Aviv know the way to do things alone. And with a very strong way, but there is a lot of files in the mitigation and in the climate change that we need the support of the national level. It's not a support, final support, but it's regulation change and the independence way to do things with other cities, the strong cities, the central cities, and to keep our strategic go on, and to get the community, to give the community the chance and the city the chance to get the situation better, because we are a dense city, we are built a lot, and all the challenges are inside Tel Aviv, the transportation challenges, and go on. So that's the brief of the...
So you need more regulation flexibility, I would say,
flexibility,
from the government.
regulation, and co-partnership with the national level and the other cities like the 15 forum cities, because the changes is not the local one. It's a national and the global and of the middle of the city.
Okay, thanks. Eli, you know that we are going to have elections next year, municipal elections all over Israel. And I would like to ask you, from your experience, do you think that the environment issues, the climate change issue, are going to take a dramatic place in the priority of your campaign, for instance, as a mayor? And how do you think the inhabitants of Eilat feels about that? Are they going to vote partly towards environmental issues, or they're going to vote because of education, welfare, things like that?
Like building on the beaches, for instance?
Okay. I will speak for myself, okay? I don't know about other mayors, but what I can say that every mayor wants to have a legacy in the city he serves. And for me, moving a lot towards Total Energy.
זה האופוזיציה
It's
שלך.
because of the beaches.
There's a great feeling when you see one interviewed President Obama. You saw that how he catched it. You know, it was people are teaching it in leadership sessions. Yes, Eli, you should catch it and become. Okay, please.
Okay, another try. So for me, moving a lot towards total energy independence, developing food from the sea, making a lot a sustainable city is the most significant contribution I can make. And I can say that I am very proud that Eilat was selected by the European Union as one of 112 climate neutral and smart cities by 2030, 100 EU cities and 12 connected to the EU by Horizon Europe. We were the only city in Israel selected by the European Union, and we are very proud of it. So for me, I will continue, of course, in that direction, of course.
Okay, thank you, Eli. Ofer, let's talk about transportation. Okay, we know that many Israelis driving not many, but more and more Israelis are driving electric cars. I myself drive one as well. How do you prepare Ramat Ishai, if any, to that phenomenon? How many people in Ramat Ishai wants to have an electric car? Are you ready for that? And what do you do with public transportation? Do you have any things that connected to that? And what about electric buses, electric taxis? Are you allowing them to get into Ramat Ishai, or are you going to stop them, unless they will be electric?
If I will start with the end of your question, this is the big problem between the central government and the local government. Because if it was my issue and my decide, it was only electricity. But who that give the permit and the license to the bus company, it's the government and not me. And about the electric car, we have like inside battle between us because most of the people have yet gas vehicles, and if we want to make charge place for the electric car, we need to free parking from all the regular car to the electric car, because if you put the station to charge the car, you have to let the parking free. And when you are doing it, the people that have, and you see the charge parking stand, no car in there, and people that have the regular car, you stole my parking, and it's a big issue. But we are doing this because I think, as I said before, we have to educate the citizen to the new world and to understand that if we will not make a change, the climate and the environment will be very bad, and we have to improve it. And if we want to do it, this is leadership, to do something not just that the people like, and what that the people need for long distance, need for better life, need for better life for our children. So this is my point of view, and I working in this way. And I want also, if you will permit me, to answer the question that you asked, Ellie. I think that we have a tent. I think that all the mayor want to deal the environment and the climate issue. And I think that it mostly talking to the youngest. And the youngest people, when you are dealing with them, they want to hear about the environment and the climate issue, and we are doing it. But when they become growing up, it's a little bit not so important because you want the education and you want the living and you want the parking and you want the garden and you want all this stuff. So when you are dealing with this stuff, it's not a critical issue, but it's issue and we're dealing with it. And we are working for it, but if you say about the election, I think that yet this is not a critical issue, it's issue.
But it will be more and more important. Okay.
Yeah, of course.
Maya, what do you think about the fact that the Forum 15 has this is a very high priority of your forum, of your network, but as Ofer said, not everywhere in Israel, unfortunately, are doing that well and looking at that issues as the highest priorities. I did my own survey few months ago, and I asked random mayors, what do you think about, what are your 5, 6, 7 most important issues in your agenda? Almost nobody said the environment, because they have so many problems. First of all, budgetary problems, and then education, welfare, and many others. So in many cases, that's not one of their most important priorities. How do you change that? From your experience, how do you think it will be? Because we want to change it. The government wants to change it. You want to change it. Everyone wants to change it. How can we do that?
You know, I think if you'd ask our mayors as well, and most government ministers, none of them would mention environment as one of the 5 main issues. So I don't think this is a gap that characterizes any differentiation between our cities and other cities. I think that many cities, many local authorities deal with everyday issues and everyday challenges that are so significant that in some ways and in many ways it doesn't leave them the ability to take care and to address other issues. In some cases, they have the opportunity to do that, and I think the cities we're in or in which these issues are strongest, not only the major cities, many municipalities, are places where the mayors, the leadership, and the professional leadership understood that environment and climate aren't a separate issue from economy and societal issues and educational issues. As Ofer mentioned, education is one of the issues. And one of the big challenges here is that we're talking about the future, even if it's a near future. Mr. Sarkozy-Bonessi said, we don't want to pay for something not to happen. We don't think it's going to happen to us. I think that's the main challenge, because when you invest in education, you can measure the higher rates of levels and grades, whatever. But you don't actually measure, at least it isn't apparent to us, how many times we didn't get flooded, how many days were less hot, how many times we could walk on the street and be comfortable. We don't notice these things, or if we notice, we think it's an individual issue. And the second challenge is the gap between the private and the public, and that's a general gap in economy. Everyone wants to have their, I mentioned their car, their grass, and that. So we have to give a bit of that up, a bit like the taxation system, a bit of my garden up, in order that we all have a joint garden. And this is where we require policy, and this is where we require very much stronger central and local government relations, as Hagit mentioned. If we don't work together, even if one mayor advances something but it doesn't get support, or she from central government continuing to doing sometimes opposite things, or if government does something and the mayors don't support it, we will not achieve anything. So I think the answer is, the key is working together.
Thank you. Yes, of course. Hagit, I want to ask you.
I want to answer.
You want to answer what?
The question of Maya.
But I want to ask you a different question. You want to relate to that? Okay. But I want to ask you.
It's a free spirit panel.
I have a very, very good question for you. So don't.
Okay.
So spare some time for that as well, please. Relate to that, and then I'll ask you.
Related to Maya, I think that the population, or we separated for 2 groups. The group that accepted the city to take responsibility of the way of life of the citizen, and the group that vulnerable people that attacked from the condition of the climate change, the resilience side of the map of the city. So it's not a privileged issue to deal with. It's nowadays the built area, the floods, the heat, the green space, and so on. So it's not opportunity if we go to deal with climate change or no. It's our life.
Good. Now the last question for you, because Eitan tells me that we are running out of time. Please talk to him. In the meanwhile, I will ask Hagit. Listen, Hagit, we are talking about ambitions and goals and everything. We want to see real action, and you are responsible for the plan, but we have to implement the plan. So tell us more about when Tel Aviv is going to be free from carbon or whatever.
Free from cars.
Free from cars, free from whatever, free from corkiness. No, it's
I think about Ramat Ishai. Why are you asking him about cars? No cars, it's the solution.
Okay, so tell me.
That's the way of Tel Aviv thinking.
No car is the solution if the public transportation will work as well.
So work about the public transportation, because the planning Ophir mentioned is the start point for good transportation. Without planning cities and the area and even the rural area, the community area, suitable for transportation, public transportation, there is no public transportation condition in Israel. So it's not only the ministry.
We want electric
and also
public transportation.
And also
electric public transportation.
But the start point is the planning area and the good conditions for the public transportation and walkability. Because if we want to promote public transportation, we need to promote a very good condition for walking. The shadow, the trees, the sidewalk, and so on. So let's keep it in mind. Planning, planning, planning.
Thank you so much to Hagit, to Eli Lankri, to Maya Carpentry, to Ofer Ben-Eliezer, to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
And to Mr. Ophir Paz-Pines, we didn't finish. Please stay with us. Thank you, guys, for this panel, for the important insight into the everyday challenges involved in closing the gap between the vision and reality. Finally, to conclude today's event, we are honored to invite Mr. Shlomo Dolberg, Director of the Federation of Local Authorities in Israel. Shlomo, please.
Thank you very much. Okay, so thanks for the spokesman. I agree with most of things were spoken here, and you will see it on my slides. I'm Shlomo Dolberg. Do you hear me at the end? Shiri? Shomat? I'm a CEO of the Federation of Local Authorities of Israel. And we in the authority, we are between the municipalities and the governmental offices. We are trying to represent, advocate the local authority in front of the governmental offices, and of course to guide the local authorities as much as we can. I prepared some slides, and I would like to show them. Do you know where it is? Ophir, do you know? Where is this place? Nachon. Right. It's in the middle of Tel Aviv. between the streets of Begin and Rakevet. And it's in the middle of the day. Thank you for the photographer. We have here a few photographers I would like to thank. Dr. Tal Goldrat, Karnit. Thank you, Shiri. Nice photography. And we will speak about solutions. Do you know, maybe Hagit knows where it is? No. Hedera. This is the power station of Hedera, one of the largest power stations in Israel. And I'd like to speak about another elephant in the room. Speaking about reducing the emissions, I don't think the ability of most of the local authorities to contribute something essential to the reducing of the emissions is possible. Most of the activities which are possible by the local authorities are the adoption, and we will speak about it. They are doing some minor activities in reducing the emissions, but most of their activities are the adoption. You can see Haifa. I will put this slide. Yes, you can see a minor thing from my point of view that they are doing, like this solar lighting and other things, and the electric charges, but it's not major activities that could influence the reducing the emissions. What they can do, and they are doing, is the adapting. The adapting, as Hagit said, it's saving lives. Saving lives, it's the important thing that local authorities are doing to save the life of the population, to save their health. This is adapting. And this is something that we are doing in the last 5 years. Situation room to coordinate between the emergency institute during fires and flooding and every danger to the population. You can see it's in Tel Aviv. You can see the solar panels. You can see the shading of the places. It's a little, yes. It's in? Public school, yes. It's public school. And it's something that it's important, but it's not the majority of the activities of the local authorities. Another shadowing in Rabin Square. And here you can see what local authorities can do. Could guide the employees, could advise, could learn, but most of the activities is the adapting. You can see the flooding. Everybody here in the room understands what is the flooding risks. And what can local authorities do? Invest and build the pipeline to have the floating going on. And for this, of course, we need budget, and we need to get it inside the local taxes. This is emergency preparation. This man is not Sylvester Stallone. Do you know who it is? Mr. Amir Kochavi is the mayor of the municipality of Hod HaSharon. Amir Kochavi was going into the water in the great flooding, and it demonstrates what is the possibility of the local authorities. As Ofer said, the municipality is very close to the residents, is very close to the population, and of course protect the population in this crisis. Finally, I'd like to speak about two optimistic issues concerning the climate crisis. Speaking about the drying out of the sources of drinking water. In Israel, we have recycling plants, and we treat, with the help of the water and sewage company owned by the municipalities, we treat around 80% of the wastewater of the urban sector. 80% of the wastewater is going to recycling and to the agricultural irrigation. And I think this is very optimistic because it's a very, very modern situation, and we will reach some other goals that we speak of. Here you see the desalination plants. Also, desalination plants are supplying 80% of the water consumption of the local authorities of the urban sector. And I can tell you that in going this way, in a few years, from drinking water, we will not be dependent on Mother Nature. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shlomo. I would like to end this event by thanking all the people who were involved in bringing it about, to our speakers and panelists. A special thanks to the organizers of this event, Dr. Orly Onen. Where is she? Dr. Orly Onen, Maya Crabtree, Adas Bar Hemeli, Shiri Steindal Stella and her team, Idit Od and Karnit Goldwasser here. Also, to thank the Ministry of Environmental Protection and Ministry of Foreign Affairs for hosting us in this amazing pavilion. I would like to thank all the audience who attended this event, both here and watching online. Thank you all for coming. Goodbye, and I invite you to stay and attend to the next event led by the municipality of Eilat. Goodbye and good evening.